The military embargo is a campaign which is based on the decision of a lot of organizations, of human rights organizations and international law organizations to achieve equality, justice, and freedom for Palestinians through peaceful means. In the context that we had before October 7, where a lot of weapons were used by Israel to commit war crimes, there is an obligation on countries not to provide weapons to Israel if there is a suspicion that those weapons will be used to commit war crimes. But here, really, it's a question of interpretation, and different governments who decided to close their eyes and ignore the crimes committed by the Israeli military could argue that they are under no obligation to impose a military embargo. Now, this has changed with the decision of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in January 26 this year. The ICJ has not only said that Israel is suspected of committing war crimes, but also that there is a strong possibility and a strong indication for the committing of the crime of genocide. Now, this is a very important legal point because the military embargo is no longer a question of choice. This creates obligation for third states. Third states, which means states that are not Israel and not Palestine, have a responsibility not to be complicit with the genocide, and they have to respect the military embargo. And this also has to be clarified that the military embargo contains three elements. We often think only about one, which is not to sell weapons to Israel, a country suspected of committing genocide. But there are two more. The second one is that it's also illegal to buy weapons from a country which is suspected of committing genocide. This is a clear responsibility for Japan, not to buy Israeli weapons. And three, not to transit weapons. So this means that if the United States wants to send weapons to Israel through Japan, weapons that the United States has, for example, in the Okinawa base, Japan is not allowed to transit the weapons to Israel. Now, I heard the speakers before me speak about the decision of Itochu and Nippon Air Systems, and I wanted to also agree with what they said. First of all, this is a very exciting and very hopeful moment for us to see these very big companies making such an important decision and inspiring Palestinians around the world to believe that there is hope. And it is also a strong message to send to the Israeli society, because this is reported in the Israeli media, and the Israelis know that the world is watching and that Japanese companies do not want to be complicit in these crimes. So we should not underestimate the symbolic importance of this decision, but we also have to acknowledge that the decision of Itochu and Nippon Air Systems not to cooperate in the research project with Elbit Systems will not be enough to stop the drones, will not be enough to prevent Israel from continuing to kill civilians. If we want to really understand what is the most important weapon that Israel is using against Palestinians, I think no weapon is more important than the 155 millimeter artillery shell. The 155 millimeter artillery shell became the most common traded ammunition because of the war in Ukraine, and armies around the world are stockpiling very large amounts of this ammunition. It should be clear that this is not a weapon that was designed to attack civilians. It's a very inaccurate artillery weapon which can destroy entire houses and kill people indiscriminately. And Israel's use of artillery in a densely populated area is a very serious war crime. Israel has a battalion of artillery cannons. Each one of them is called the M107 can fire 500 of these shells every day. And each shell weighs 45 kilograms. If you look at the pictures of Gaza and you see the terrible destruction, you see rubble as far as the eye can see, it is because of the 155 millimeter shells. And we see here a picture of the Israeli president, Yitzhak Herzog, signing one of those shells. This is a very common practice in the Israeli military and also the government of people writing on the shells before they are fired into Gaza. Now, the British largest military company, it's called BDS Systems. They published this video where I'm showing you a screenshot, and they show in the video that in modern factories, it is only possible to make 155 millimeter shells by using a robot from a company called FANUC, a Japanese company. Also, we learned from BAE Systems that the parts for the airplane F-35, which Israel uses to bomb Gaza, are also made with this robot, which is produced by the Japanese company FANUC. Here are two screenshots which were taken from promotional videos by two Israeli arms companies. One is called Bet Shemesh Engines, and the other one is called Admar. Beit Shemesh Engines is a factory that makes weapons for the largest Israeli arms companies like Elbit Systems. They also make the engines for tanks and for airplanes. And here we see in the second company, Admar, maybe it's a bit small and difficult to see, that on their computer inside the factory, there is the logo of FANUC, because they are operating the robots inside the factory. So the robots of FANUC are used to make the weapons that are now used to kill civilians in Gaza. Here are two pictures from screenshots from videos, this time from Indian military companies. The first one is called Bharat and the second one is called Adani. And these are Indian companies that are selling weapons to Israel. Adani is selling drones that, including the Hermes drone, and we saw before that Japan is also buying this drone, but it's an Israeli drone produced in India and then sold back to Israel and used in Gaza. And again, in these videos, we can see the robots made by FANUC, which are making these weapons. Now, there was a big declaration of 11 Indian trade unions of port workers who said, we will not deliver weapons to Israel from these companies. When the unions are saying, we will refuse to load ships with weapons going to Israel, we refuse to fuel these ships, they are not breaking the law. They are actually obeying the law. And we also have pictures showing the FANUC robots used in US factories, especially in the factories of General Dynamics. Most of the ammunition that the Israeli military is receiving during the genocide in Gaza comes from General Dynamics. These 155 shells, but also other bombs and the big 1-ton bombs that they are dropping on civilians in Gaza. The FANUC robots are used in the General Dynamics factories, but they're also used in a lot of other factories in the United States, like, for example, in the car factories. We have, in the BDS movement, made contact with a very big union of auto workers in the United States. It's called the UAW Michigan Union of Auto Workers. The unions are already expressing their support for Palestine, and they are using the FANUC robots to make cars. But we want them to organize a protest and say we don't want to use the products from a company which is complicit in genocide. I think the path for FANUC is very clear. how they should proceed. Like Itochu, they see that the international law forbids them from supporting the Israeli military industry. Japan has signed the Arms Trade Treaty, the ATT, which makes it also obligated to follow international law. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan already has a policy about controlling the weapons exports to areas where human rights are violated and where international law is violated. So I just wanted to conclude by thanking the organizers for this organizing this event and for launching this campaign to end the complicity with the Israeli military industry.